So picture this scenario. You're standing in a phone store, or maybe you're just browsing online, right? And you're looking at the absolute latest glass and titanium flagship device.
Oh yeah, the really shiny ones that cost a fortune.
Exactly. I mean, it is absolutely stunning. It has literally every bell and whistle imaginable. But to actually afford it, you essentially need to, like, take out a small personal loan.
Right. It's getting a bit ridiculous these days.
Totally. But then, you look over at a refurbished model from just a few years ago, and it costs about the same as, like, a nice dinner for two, yet it promises to do maybe 95% of what that $1,000 titanium beast can do.
Yeah, and it really forces you to ask yourself some tough questions.
Exactly. Which brings us to the core question for you today. Have you ever wondered if buying that older, heavily discounted phone is like the ultimate life hack, or if it's just a fast track to tech frustration?
It is honestly the ultimate modern consumer dilemma
Mm.
because, we are constantly conditioned by marketing to crave the absolute bleeding edge of technology.
Oh, 100%.
But looking at the secondary market, it really forces you to evaluate what you actually need a piece of technology to accomplish in your daily life.
And that tension is exactly what we are exploring in this deep dive. We have gathered a pretty massive stack of sources for this one. We've got the original hardware specifications, all those launch reviews from when the device was brand new, and critically, the current mid-2026 market data.
Yeah, all focused on a very specific, very interesting device.
Right. The Google Pixel 7a, originally released way back in May of 2023, and at the time, I mean, it was widely hailed as the undisputed king of the sub-$500 Android market.
It was a huge deal at launch.
It really was. But the thing is, we aren't reviewing it as a new phone today. The mission here is to extract the most important insights about how this specific device holds up after 3 years of, software updates and hardware aging, to see if it actually still holds its crown for you today.
Because honestly, reading a spec sheet at a flashy launch event doesn't tell you the whole story.
No, not at all.
Right, so our analytical approach today goes way beyond just listing off features. We really have to examine the actual mechanisms behind how this phone operates. We need to look at the longevity of the software architecture, the daily physical experience of the hardware, and ultimately, whether the compromises Google made back in 2023 actually make sense in a 2026 landscape.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the core engine of the 7a is really where Google made their biggest gamble. Under the hood, this phone runs on the Tensor G2 chip, and it's paired with 8 gigabytes of RAM.
Which was a pretty bold move at the time.
It was, because for those keeping track, the Tensor G2 is the exact same piece of silicon that powered Google's much more expensive flagship at the time, the Pixel 7. And running that chip on stock Android means you're getting a very clean, totally bloatware-free user interface.
Yeah, a really smooth experience.
But I have to stop here and kind of push back on the hype a bit, because when you look at the raw benchmark data in our sources, this chip is incredibly polarizing.
Oh, very much so. It definitely caused some debate.
Right, like it gets thoroughly outpaced by older Apple silicon in raw speed tests. And almost all the reviewers noted it has a real tendency to get noticeably warm under sustained heavy loads, like if you're gaming for a while. So my question is, why put a so-called flagship chip in a phone if it isn't actually designed to win the raw power race?
Well, what's fascinating here is that to understand that choice, we really have to look at how smartphone processing actually works. And more importantly, where Google specifically shifted the battlefield.
Okay, what do you mean by shifted the battlefield?
So historically, tech companies always fought over the CPU, the central processing unit. That's the part of the chip that handles like the raw computational math.
Which is what those benchmark tests are actually measuring, right?
Exactly. It's a race of who can open an app a millisecond faster, or who can render a 3D game at the absolute highest frame rate. But with the Tensor architecture, Google essentially just stepped away from that CPU arms race. They invested heavily in the NPU instead, which is the neural processing unit.
Right, and the NPU is specifically designed to handle artificial intelligence and machine learning tasks locally, right? Like right there on the device itself, rather than having to ping a server somewhere.
Spot on. That local processing is really the key to the entire Pixel experience. The Tensor G2 just wasn't built to run high-end games for 3 hours straight. It was built to process ambient, everyday AI tasks.
Like the call screen stuff.
Yes, exactly. When your phone rings and the call screen feature automatically answers, speaks to the suspected spammer, transcribes their response in real time on your screen, and then lets you decide whether to pick up, and does all of that without an internet connection. That is the NPU at work.
That is wild to think about.
It is. And when you're using voice typing and the phone instantly recognizes your specific speech patterns and inserts perfect punctuation as you talk, again, that is the NPU. So Google basically sacrificed top-tier gaming performance to give you a chip that acts like an invisible digital assistant.
Man, that shift from like raw brawn to specialized brains really frames how you have to use this phone. I mean, it gets warm when gaming because its thermal architecture just wasn't designed to dissipate heat from sustained CPU loads.
Right, it's not a gaming phone.
Not at all. But that NPU horsepower isn't just about screening spam calls or voice typing. That localized AI processing is actually the only reason this phone's camera can compete with devices that cost twice as much. Because without that chip, the actual camera hardware is, well, surprisingly ordinary.
Yeah, it's really the foundation of computational photography, which is arguably where the 7A made its biggest mark on the industry.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the physical camera hardware first. On the back, you have a 64-megapixel main sensor and a 13-megapixel ultra-wide lens. And on the front, there's a 13-megapixel selfie camera that can actually shoot 4K video.
Which is a nice touch for a mid-range phone.
Definitely. And that main rear camera can shoot 4K video up to 60 frames per second. But the specs that really caught my eye in the sources are optical image stabilization, or OIS, and something called pixel binning.
Both very crucial technologies.
Right, so if I understand the sources correctly, OIS is actual physical hardware. There are tiny gyroscopes and motors inside the camera module itself that physically move the lens in the opposite direction of your shaky hands just to keep the shot perfectly still.
Yeah, that physical stabilization is absolutely crucial, especially in low-light environments.
Because the shutter has to stay open longer.
Exactly. The shutter needs to stay open slightly longer to gather enough ambient light. And if the lens shakes even a millimeter during that fraction of a second, your photo is just going to be a blurry mess.
Okay, but the pixel binning is where the software really starts taking over, right? Because taking a massive 64-megapixel photo every single time you hit the shutter would result in these huge, unmanageable file sizes.
You'd fill up your phone in a week.
Exactly. So instead, the sensor physically groups clusters of 4 pixels together to act like one giant pixel. It captures 4 times the light data, which drastically reduces that awful visual noise you get in dark rooms, and then it outputs a highly detailed 16-megapixel image.
Which is just brilliant engineering on the hardware side. But the real magic happens milliseconds after that sensor captures the light data. And this brings us right back to the Tensor G2 chip.
Oh, right, the NPU again.
Yeah. When you press the shutter on the 7A, you actually aren't just taking one photograph. You're secretly taking a rapid burst of multiple underexposed and overexposed frames.
Wow, okay.
And then the NPU instantly analyzes all of them, takes the best lighting from one frame, the sharpest focus from another frame, and stitches them all together to create a final image that is infinitely better than what the raw lens could have captured on its own.
It's basically like having a tiny, lightning-fast, professional photo editor living inside the phone, instantly fixing your photos before you even see them.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah.
And that multi-frame rendering enables those crazy features like night sight, right? Where it literally turns a pitch black room into a brightly lit photo, or photo unblur, where the AI recognizes human faces and digitally sharpens them, even if the person was moving when you took the shot.
It's incredibly powerful.
But the feature that completely blew my mind in the sources was super res zoom. Because, let's be honest, there is a glaring omission on the back of this phone. There is no dedicated telephoto lens.
Right, none at all.
If you want to zoom in on a subject, you are forced to use digital zoom, which historically essentially just crops the image and leaves you with this grainy, pixelated disaster.
Yeah, in a traditional camera setup, digital zoom is just terrible. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, Google actually circumvents that missing hardware using this completely brilliant software trick.
Okay, how does it work?
So when you zoom in on the Pixel 7a, the camera software intentionally utilizes the natural, unavoidable micro-tremors in your hands.
Wait,
Yeah. As your hand shakes incredibly slightly, the sensor captures multiple frames from ever so slightly different angles. And then the NPU analyzes the microscopic differences between those frames to actually calculate and invent the missing pixel data. It fills in the gaps to create a remarkably sharp, zoomed-in photo.
So it is quite literally using your own physical imperfections, your shaky hands, to gather more data. That is incredible.
It really is.
And I feel like it proves a massive point about the state of smartphones today. Algorithmic processing can effectively bridge the gap left by missing hardware. Like, you don't always need a costly, heavy telephoto lens if your AI is smart enough to simulate one.
Exactly. It completely disrupts the traditional value proposition of high-end phones. However, accommodating a processor capable of that level of AI, along with that advanced camera sensor at a mid-range price point, means the manufacturing budget was definitely stretched thin.
Something had to give.
Right. To hit their price target in 2023, Google had to make some very deliberate physical compromises.
Well, processing billions of pixels a second generates a lot of heat. And heat brings us to the physical shell of this phone, where those compromises are incredibly obvious.
Oh yeah, you can definitely feel them.
So what does this all mean? Let's break down the design, the display, and the battery life. Physically, the 7A is a 6.1-inch device, and it weighs in at about 193 grams. It has an aluminum frame. It features that really distinctive pixel camera bar across the back, and it originally came in 4 colors: charcoal, snow, sea, and coral.
It is very compact and pocketable.
It is. But I have to flag a major issue that was highlighted in basically all the launch reviews. The back of the phone is plastic.
Yeah, that was a big talking point.
I mean, in 2023, glass was the standard even on a lot of budget phones. Doesn't wrapping a high-powered processor in a plastic shell make the phone feel kind of cheap? And more importantly, doesn't it just trap that heat we were just talking about?
The material choice is certainly a major point of friction. Polycarbonate, which is, just the industry term for that plastic back, does not dissipate heat nearly as efficiently as aluminum or glass.
Right, acting like an insulator.
Exactly, which directly contributes to the phone running warm under heavy loads. It can also feel quite slippery in the hand if you don't use a case. But the trade-off here is durability. Polycarbonate won't shatter into a million pieces when dropped on a sidewalk the way a glass back will.
Okay, I can see the practical angle there for sure, but you flip the phone over to look at the screen and the compromises just continue. The bezels, those black borders wrapping around the illuminated part of the display, are noticeably thick. It instantly makes the phone look a bit dated when you put it next to the edge-to-edge screens of modern flagships.
That's true. The display panel itself is really a mix of highs and lows. It is a 6.1-inch Full HD Plus OLED, which gives you really vibrant colors and deep blacks. It also features a 90 Hz refresh rate.
Which makes a huge difference.
Oh, massive. For context, the refresh rate is basically how many times the screen updates the image every single second. Older phones ran at 60 Hz. So pumping that up to 90 Hz means that when you scroll through an article or like your social media feed, the motion feels fluid and incredibly responsive to your touch.
But, and this is a big but, the sources specifically criticize the outdoor brightness. It is described by multiple reviewers merely as adequate.
Yeah, that's not a word you want for a screen.
No. If you are trying to read a text message or frame up one of those amazing photos in direct, harsh sunlight, you are going to be squinting. The screen just doesn't get bright enough to overpower the sun.
It can be very frustrating.
And add to that an under-display fingerprint sensor that reviewers found finicky and pretty inconsistent, though there is face unlock to fall back on, at least.
Yeah, those are undeniable daily frustrations. But we really have to transition to what I think are the most significant limitations of the device, which are the storage and the battery charging architecture.
Oh man, this is where the math really stops adding up for me. The storage on the 7A is capped at 128 gigabytes, and there is absolutely no micro SD card slot to expand it.
Which is a huge bottleneck.
It's massive. We just spent a significant amount of time praising this phone's ability to shoot 4K video at 60 frames per second on the main camera and 4K on the selfie camera.
And those 4K video files are absolutely massive.
Right. If you are a heavy user actually actively taking advantage of the incredible camera system they sold you on, 128 gigabytes is going to fill up remarkably fast. You are practically forced to pay for cloud storage subscriptions just to offload your files.
Which, creates an ecosystem lock-in.
Yeah.
It's highly advantageous for Google's cloud services bottom line, obviously, but it's incredibly restrictive for the user who just wants local storage.
Totally. But the compromise that truly tests my patience in reading these sources is the charging speed.
It's rough.
The 7A has a 4,385 milliamp hour battery, and because it has a slightly smaller 6.1-inch screen, that battery can actually comfortably last a full day of moderate use.
The battery life itself is fine.
Right. The problem is what happens when it eventually dies. The phone is physically capped at 18-watt wired charging. And to rub salt in the wound, it doesn't even come with a charging brick in the box.
Yeah, that 18-watt limit is remarkably conservative for a modern device. To explain why this really matters, we kind of have to look at lithium-ion battery chemistry.
Okay, break it down for us.
So charging a modern smartphone battery is a lot like packing a suitcase for a long trip. Throwing your clothes in at the very beginning is fast and easy, right? You have plenty of room. That is why phones usually charge from 0 to 50% quite rapidly.
Makes sense.
But as the suitcase gets full, squeezing in those final few items takes really careful management, otherwise you break the zipper. In a battery, forcing energy into a nearly full cell generates excessive heat, and that heat permanently degrades the battery's overall lifespan over time.
So by intentionally capping the charging at 18 watts, Google is essentially choosing to pack that suitcase in slow motion to manage the heat and protect the long-term health of the battery.
Precisely. They heavily prioritized battery longevity over user convenience.
But the real-world result of that is that a full charge from 0 to 100% often takes an hour and a half to 2 hours, which is brutal. It's like trying to fill a swimming pool with a garden hose.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, if you are a heavy user who needs a quick 15-minute top-up before heading out for the evening, that 18-watt limit is going to be incredibly frustrating. It does also offer wireless charging, which is cool, but that is capped at a glacial 7.5 watts, which is really only useful for, like, leaving it on a nightstand while you sleep for 8 hours.
Yeah, it requires a completely different charging habit. You just can't plug it in for 10 minutes and expect a massive boost.
Right. But amidst all these compromises, the plastic back, the dim screen, the crazy slow charging, there is a massive hardware win that we absolutely have to highlight. The Pixel 7a carries an official IP67 dust and water resistance rating.
And that is a remarkable inclusion for a device that launched under $500.
It really was rare at the time.
Very rare. The IP67 rating means the phone is completely protected against dust ingress, and it can actually survive being submerged in up to 1 meter of water for a full 30 minutes.
So if you drop it in the sink doing dishes, or you get caught in a torrential downpour, the phone survives. No rice bag needed.
Exactly.
So putting all this together, the design philosophy of the 7a becomes crystal clear. It is just a masterclass in giving consumers high-end, premium features like that flagship Tensor chip, the incredible computational photography, and the water resistance, but doing it at the direct expense of convenience, features like fast charging and expandable storage.
Which naturally brings us to the most critical evaluation for you, the listener, right now. We need to understand how those specific 2023 compromises feel when you attach a 2026 price tag to them.
Right, let's do the 2026 calculus. At launch, the Pixel 7a was $499, but the smartphone market is notoriously brutal when it comes to depreciation.
It drops like a rock.
It does. Fast forward to mid-2026, and a quick look at the refurbished and used markets shows this exact phone widely available for roughly $150 to $250, depending on, the cosmetic condition. On the surface, paying $200 for a phone with a near flagship camera, wireless charging, and IP67 water resistance feels like the greatest tech bargain of the decade.
It really is an undeniable value in terms of pure hardware per dollar. But the hardware is only half of the equation in a modern smart device. The true lifespan of a phone is dictated by its software support, specifically its security architecture.
And this is the catch.
It is. When Google launched the 7a, they guaranteed 5 years of updates from the initial release date.
Which means the clock is loudly ticking. 5 years from May 2023 places the absolute end of life for this device around May 2028. We're less than 2 years away from that cliff. And I think a lot of people underestimate what actually happens when a phone stops getting updates. It isn't just about missing out on, like, a fun new emoji or a slight redesign of your notification shade.
No, it is entirely about security vulnerabilities. The Android operating system is constantly being probed by malicious actors looking for exploits.
It's a constant battle.
Exactly. Google releases monthly security patches to plug those holes. But once May 2028 hits and those patches stop coming, any newly discovered vulnerability in the 7a just remains open permanently. Continuing to use the phone for sensitive tasks like your mobile banking, managing cryptocurrency, or accessing secure work emails, it becomes a significant quantifiable risk.
Wow. That dramatically shifts the cost-to-benefit ratio. I mean, you might be getting a $200 phone, but you are effectively just renting that security for less than 2 years. And the sources point out that this is exactly why you have to look at the 7a's immediate successor, the Pixel 8a.
This raises an important question about the true cost of ownership, because the Pixel 8a changes the math entirely.
It really does.
It upgrades several of the physical hardware friction points we discussed. It features a significantly brighter display that hits a much smoother 120 Hz refresh rate, meaning outdoor visibility and scrolling are vastly improved.
Fixing the dim screen issue.
Yes. And it uses the newer Tensor G3 chip, which offers slightly better thermal management and battery life.
But the absolute game changer is the software promise. Google gave the 8 series a massive, completely unprecedented 7-year software support window.
And that singular change redefines the concept of smartphone value.
Yeah.
If you were comparing a refurbished 7A at $200 to a used 8A that might cost slightly more, the 8A is objectively the better long-term buy. That 7-year window means you aren't forced to throw away perfectly good hardware just because the security software arbitrarily expired.
So to bring this all together for you, if you are on a strict, immovable budget of around $200 right now and you desperately need a phenomenal camera, clean software, and a phone that won't die if you drop it in a puddle, the Pixel 7a is an incredible choice.
It really is, for that specific need.
But you just have to consciously accept that you are buying a sprint to 2028. You will have to constantly manage that 128 gigabyte storage limit. You will have to charge it slowly overnight, and you will absolutely need to replace it in 2 years when the security patches stop. But if you are the type of person who despises upgrading, if migrating all your apps and passwords to a new device sounds like an absolute nightmare, and you want a reliable tool that will safely last you for the next half-decade, the 7a is a trap. You need to expand your budget slightly and look at the 8a.
It ultimately comes down to understanding your own relationship with technology. Are you buying for immediate utility, or are you buying for longevity? The Pixel 7a forces you to answer that question.
It really does. It is a device that completely ignores raw benchmark power to prioritize software polish and everyday AI conveniences. It proves that computational photography can manipulate light and shadow in ways that mimic heavy, expensive camera lenses, but it demands patience when you plug it into the wall, and it carries an unavoidable expiration date.
It remains a fascinating case study in how targeted, intelligent software can extend the relevance of mid-range hardware well beyond its initial launch window.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering thought for you to explore on your own. We started by asking if you really need to spend $1,000 on the newest flagship device. Well, if a mid-range phone from 2023 built with a plastic back, thick bezels, and literally zero optical zoom lenses can still deliver such an incredibly polished and capable daily experience in 2026, almost entirely because of the localized AI processing data in the background, have we finally reached a plateau where smartphone hardware innovation has essentially peaked?
That is a very profound question.
Right, because if a specialized microchip can magically unblur a photo, simulate an optical zoom lens using your hand tremors, and transcribe your voice perfectly in real time, is chasing the newest titanium chassis actually just a fool's errand? Perhaps the true tech revolution is no longer happening in the hardware we hold, but entirely in the software running silently beneath the glass.
That realization definitely alters how you evaluate the value of every single device on the market today.
It certainly makes you think twice before emptying your wallet. Thank you so much for joining the conversation with us. Keep questioning the tech you use every day, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.